I got interested in this us versus them dynamic because I was reminded that somebody uses this dynamic in their videos that they make. So I decided to do some research myself and see how this us versus them dynamic affects people on a deeper psychological level and why it can also be proven effective in numerous different scenarios throughout life as people participate in sports, in government, in reading even, and just seeing what level of impact do we not understand about this topic. And I feel like that it's also very important to mention that modern society has really impacted us in a way where the way that we work now, it's very interconnected. We have social media, we have technology, which often has a global connection compared to old tribal methods like seeing if that person's bad, that person's good, so on and so forth. And this excited me in a way because it's an interesting idea to explore, and I'm going to stop talking about that. But obviously it's important to mention this because the contrast really points out how the us versus them dynamic is not working in the society. And I figured that maybe that would change your bias in some way, shape, or form towards how you think about the us versus them dynamic. Interestingly, it actually turns out that human identification for like groups, like you belong to this group, you belong to that group, it actually can be over a lot of like almost anything, even like arbitrary grouping methods like coin flipping, for instance. And rather, a lot of people would think, well, can I change this? And unfortunately, you can't, because how this works is that it's what's considered like back of the brain, which is like deep, it's like probably like around here or something. It's deep psychological, neurological type of methods that have helped humans survive throughout the past X amount of years. I don't really like to state how many years we've been alive because I have no clue. That's just my opinion. But with that aside, it's also important to bring up that this was evolutionary, which I think I already brought up, so apologies. But anyways, going on. This ideology is honestly used almost everywhere you look. For instance, politics, sports, books that you read, they all often use this us versus them dynamic to help the individual that is reading this keep themselves engaged. And it is a way that a single individual can create unison around them for that person. However, it often causes more separation due to the idea that us versus them is usually us being 2 or 5 people, or really like 100, 150, compared to them being everybody else that exists. So it oftentimes has a much higher separation to unison ratio, which can be good or bad. And I mean, considering that it was good enough for us to survive until now, it's probably something that we should consider holding on to for future generations. Anyways, as of the direction that the modern society is set up into, which I heard someone refer to it as urban monoculture, meaning that it is, well, urban meaning cities and stuff, monoculture meaning all following like one specific cultural idea, which obviously is bad for many reasons. It's the same idea as, to put it into a dumbed down perspective, it's like a set of plants all having the same code. So if one gets the one disease that weakens them, they all die, right? That's the same thing with a culture. And this also has a profound setup for failure because described in, it's a book that I read called The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. And in the book, it describes this idea of like open giving, meaning like the ability to give to the audience or to a person or to your loved one in the maximum amount of ways possible without really expecting anything in return, just to be able to exist in that form. And this open gifting also in a way creates an us versus them dynamic, but it's the ability to enter the us dynamic easily that creates that change between urban monoculture and still having this us versus them dynamic, which was culturally important for us for the past hundreds of years, right? And these individual groupings that people participate in, they also determine how individuals think about themselves. And a great example of this would be like Democrats versus Republicans. Democrats usually think they are altruistic people helping others get liberated of pain or suffering in any way, shape, or form, whether it be social, economical, so on and so forth. And Republicans often think of themselves as people who operate in real world problems and understand that this is a destructive decision and this is a not destructive decision. So create these us versus them dynamics causes people to choose and become enemies in return, which fair enough, it can be bad, but it can also be good because it allows people's ideas to be interconnected as one grouping rather than having a bunch of people, like maybe 15 different parties, spread their ideas and becoming this basically like ideological like trough where nothing's really actually prominent and there's no real stability, which if we know anything about humanity, stability equals good, not stability equals bad. Simple, right? So sorry, I'm gonna come in a little bit here. So, and to think about it in this way, this dynamic has actually been shown to be so powerful throughout history that it allows people like Hitler to overthrow the German government because they use this us versus them dynamic, and it creates this ability to obtain power through the idea of this group is the best group, or not even the best, but this group is a safe group. Because a lot of times in tribal periods, which this makes sense if you think about it, everyone just wanted a safe group. They didn't necessarily care about if the group was like the best or had the most amount of food. That was a more secondary requirement. They wanted to make sure that they would be able to sleep at night. So in this way, it helps people understand how us versus them is really this deep, psychologically rooted explanation for why people get into fights, why governments get overthrown, and how people can be connected yet split apart at the same time. It's because of these characteristics that people can proclaim as us, and then the other ones that they proclaim as them, which even in a lot of circumstances also can be with a singular person, where they have a certain set of characteristics which you like, which you identify with, us, and a certain amount of characteristics you dislike, you don't identify with, them. And when they're in one person, it creates often a really awkward relationship or an awkward neutrality, which, pairing with the social loneliness spike that has been majorly uprising in the past 10, 20 years at least, it it's really a, how do I describe it? It's a really, come on, what's the word? With this loneliness, it's just like, it brings a sense of misunderstanding to how people interact with each other in a way. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what exactly I want to say here, because I don't know. I don't think there is anything else to say, to be honest with you. But I just want to make the point that the us versus them dynamic can be harnessed by anybody, whether consciously aware of it or not, and it can also affect people consciously aware or not. So I would say if you were to try to use this as a weapon or to use it as a source of power, I would say use it with caution, because it can be very easily flipped against you, hence why not many people have power, right? I mean, think about this. Think about how, if we're going back to the Hitler example, think about how Hitler allied with the Russians, and then the Russians broke alliance with Hitler. Simply because the us versus them dynamic was broken, and the Russians did not like that as much, hence going into an attack on Germany. Or whatever Germany had at the time, the whole, basically Europe. But anyways. So, that's it. And I hope you got some decent amount of knowledge out of what the us versus them dynamic is. I recommend doing more research on your own in case if you are interested. But as always, we're here to help us help them.